you're one of those lucky people that goes to bed, puts their head on the pillow, falls asleep, wakes up at the right time to the alarm, well, that's fantastic. I'm really happy for you because you are in a minority and we don't have a lot of understanding or sympathy for those that don't necessarily have that luxury.
That sounded very malicious.
And it is.
But good on you.
That's right. Yes. Welcome back to The Connected Athlete. I'm joined by Elke Parker, my co-host, and today we're going to be talking about sleep. I get a lot of questions from athletes, parents, and coaches about what it is to teach an athlete to have healthy sleep habits, but also what is the impact of not having enough sleep. Firstly, it is really hard for someone to change their sleep routine. So how we develop our own sleep habits and routines tends to stay with us for a very long time. The other part of that is we can't actually change what we're doing when we sleep either. So if we are injured or we're having trouble sleeping because of pain or a position in our sleep that we're actually in, it's really hard for us to change that. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the impact of poor sleep, because this has an impact on people day to day, day in, day out. If you're having poor sleep, it has a huge impact on your mental health and your physical health. When we're talking about sleep, it is the only way that our body fully recovers. So there's been lots and lots of research about all sorts of things that lead to good recovery, and it all comes back to our ability to sleep and rest. Whilst we sleep, our body goes through a process where it repairs our cells. So it's really important that our body gets this opportunity to wind down, our heart rate drops, our blood pressure drops, our body goes into a nice restful state where we can actually regenerate our body. If we don't get that opportunity and we're not getting good quality sleep regularly, it does have a big impact on how we can then perform as an athlete and perform as a student or as a work colleague. It has huge impacts on our day-to-day life. A lack of sleep also has impacts on how we would eat, believe it or not. So again, it has a big impact on how we could perform moving forward. I'm going to be a little bit controversial here with some of the younger people in our audience, and that is talking about devices before bed. I get a lot of questions from parents about how the devices can impact our kids at night. Certainly this is a big area of questioning and understanding, so I thought we would talk quickly about the impact of these devices and what they actually do to our sleep habits. For example, if I'm about to go to bed and I go through the nice routine of having a shower, brushing my teeth, getting into my pajamas, getting into my bed, my body is already starting to get into a routine where it's thinking, oh, we do this every night, we go through this process, therefore once I lie down in bed, my body and my brain are starting to think, oh, it's time to actually start to rest and go off to sleep. If I do all of those things and then I lie in bed on my iPad or my laptop or my phone, you're actually starting to stimulate your brain again. So you're looking at things, we're taking information in, there's light coming into our eyes. So the devices themselves are stimulating you to the point where they're keeping you awake. And a lot of people use them at night when they get that time to sit and look at the device, or a lot of kids are still communicating online through all sorts of apps late into the night, and they're wondering why they're not getting any sleep. The controversial part of this is that kids want to be in touch with people constantly, and it is an ongoing problem with parents, I know, in what do we do with these devices to help our young athletes and our kids get better sleep. I don't have all the answers. I certainly have come across those challenges, trying to explain the reasons why we might not have the devices at night, have certain times at night where the devices go away. And that is challenging as a parent, for sure. But if you really want to do the right thing and get good sleep, the devices really need to have a routine of their own. For example, every night at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, the device goes away and they can go through their sleep routine. Sleep routines are really important because, like I said earlier, they will get you to a point where your brain and your body are starting to recognize that routine. So making sure that you have the same type of routine every night can assist in getting good sleep. One of the things that we also need to avoid before just going to sleep or within that sort of hour of going to sleep is what we eat in that time. So whenever we eat, we get a spike in our sugar levels and we get that digestion process happening. And sometimes that can stimulate our body and wake us up, particularly if it's things like dessert, so ice cream, fruit, yogurt, things with sugar in them. We should be trying to avoid those just before we go to sleep. And that's so that our body can keep our blood sugar levels at a lower level. When our blood sugars are at a lower level, we are not so energized, so we'll be able to relax into our sleep.
I think it's all about training your body into a routine. There's a lot of
No.
There are studies that show people who have their work set up in their room, a lot of people who work from home, they'll have their computer in their room and their desk. They actually get worse sleep because their computer's there, they get up in the morning and they go straight to their computer. It's a similar thing with your phone, waking up in the morning and needing your phone and looking at your phone straight away. If you're seeking stimulus straight away in the morning and it's Instagram reels and they're quick fixes, I guess, of serotonin, you're going to try and search for that all day. And that has a huge effect on focus on your brain.
And I think we don't put enough value in sleep. A lack of sleep can also lead to other disease states and risk factors and health risk factors that we don't even consider. So the importance of sleep needs to be established really early. So our young people need to understand how important it is to get good sleep. I can tell you as a parent that if you can get better sleep out of your athletes, you will have a better behaving athlete because they won't be tired and cranky, they won't be frustrated all the time, and you won't be necessarily having that battle with them about their devices on a regular basis because you've established a routine. The other thing that we need to consider with a lack of sleep is what effect is it having long term? So if I don't sleep well as a young person, do I sleep well as an older person? And as we get older, the health implications of poor sleep have an effect ongoing. So it just builds and builds and builds. If you're someone who can fall asleep really easily, but you can't stay asleep, that's very different again. Or if you're someone that falls asleep but only sleeps for 4 or 5 hours, how do we change those things? Another part of sleep, and I can honestly say that this is something that I've always struggled with my whole life. Sleep has never been my friend. I get really frustrated when I come across someone that says, I just put my head on the pillow and I'm off to sleep and I get my 8 hours of sleep and then I wake up and I'm fine. Those people don't realise how lucky they are. But part of that for me as a personal, a personal situation is that when I used to lie down in bed, that's when all my thoughts would start to be released in my head. It was like, now there's quiet time, bang. I'm going to put every worry, every concern, everything I've got to do tomorrow or next week into my head, and it would just go round and round and round. And it is the most frustrating part of trying to sleep. Being able to recognise that took me a very long time. And over the years, and I'm talking, the last 4 to 5 years, I've really worked on my own sleep routine, and I'm certainly benefiting from that. The main things around developing these sleep routines and improving your own sleep is recognizing what's stopping you sleeping. So we talked about devices, and that's the obvious one with not just our kids, but also us as adults. We do rely on devices to keep us company and to watch particular things on at night, read books on, whatever it might be. We do rely on that stimulus. But there are also other reasons why we might not be falling asleep. One might be pain. If we've got an injury and we can't get comfortable, that can impact our sleep. If we've got a lot of homework due or we've got anxious thoughts, then that will start to keep us awake. The next part of that is identifying what it is that's keeping us awake and not letting us sleep, or why we're not getting to sleep at a regular time. And then coming up with some of the answers for that. So for me personally, I have to stick to my routine. I know that I have to go through, okay, shower, do my teeth, put my pajamas on, get into bed, read my book, go to sleep. And that is my absolute routine every time I go to bed. When I don't do that, in the odd times where I'm out of routine, I do find it very difficult. And it has taken me so long to develop that sleep routine that unfortunately now, if I'm not in that sleep routine, I find it hard. The other the other things that I have tried along the way is music in the background, but with no words. So more like your relaxation music, where you can just have it in the background, very quiet, where your brain will tune into it and you can start to relax and concentrate on your breathing. And the other things that you can try are low meditation, so that you take your focus and put it into either listening to the music or think about your breathing. So there's a lot of breathing techniques that you can do to try and bring yourself down, take your anxious thoughts and try and focus in on something else and leave those anxious thoughts till to the next day. Another thing that you can try if you do have a lot of things going on in your brain, for example, most people, if they're going to go on a trip the next day and they're having to pack or get themselves ready, often you'll be lying in bed thinking, now tomorrow morning I've got to make sure that I don't forget that, and I've got that to do, and there's a couple of other things, and then that will spin around in your head. And until you resolve that, you're probably going to find that you don't have the best sleep before you have to get up in the morning and go. So writing some of those things down on a piece of paper beside your bed is one way of taking it from your brain and releasing it onto paper. So you know now, okay, I've written that down. I know I won't forget because it's written down. So having some of those strategies in place as well is really good. Journaling. So if there is something at the end of the day or at night while you're lying in bed and you're really worried about it, or it's something that is not resolving in your own head, writing it down, get it out of your head. Sometimes that can be really good at releasing that information so that it's not going around and around and it's not continuing to be a worry. Anxious thoughts is something that a lot of people experience at night, and it's often the things that you may have thought about during the day, but you haven't had the time to stop and think about. The most important part of that is, yes, you need to understand that they are anxious thoughts. And we've talked about controlling the controllable in one of our other podcasts. We need to then establish, why are we anxious? What are some of the things we can put in place right now to stop that anxious thoughts? And then how do we have a look at it and think, are we worrying for worrying's sake? Can we control what's going to happen? Or are we just worrying about it because we're not sure about what will happen?
My mum had a hilarious way of telling me good thought process of how to get to sleep. I'd come running out because I never slept well. I had nightmares growing up a lot. And she would say to me, Elkie, just think, what are you there to do? You're there to sleep. And she would just say, repeat that in your head. And now, as an adult, I've found setting some positive intentions and just repeating those in my head have actually helped me sleep, because I'm focusing on those rather than the anxious thoughts that are going on. interrupted sleep was also something that I had issues with, nightmares, and I know a lot of kids do have nightmares, and I did have to go to counselling growing up because of my nightmares. They were crazy. And they gave me a worry wombat, which was a pine cone, and pieces of paper that I would write down the nightmare I would write down the nightmare and put it in the worry wombat, and it would take it away, basically. Just like journaling as an adult, that's something that you can provide for your kids if they're younger. They can write it down when they wake up, have a glass of water to distract them, and try to go back to sleep.
It certainly is an area that needs a lot of work, and everyone is a little bit different. So coming up with the right strategy for the right person can sometimes take a little bit of time. I guess if you're having a lot of anxious thoughts, then they need to be expressed during the day. And as a parent, if you're identifying that those anxieties are coming out at night, then it might be time to get some assistance or talk them through it. Make sure that there's a conversation before bed where they maybe be able to release some of that anxiety and talk to them about what it is they're worried about, maybe put some strategies in place, and I guess bring that anxiety level down. You can't always take away the thoughts in our head. That's the only person that can control that is us, unfortunately, and it's about, as we go through life, learning how to understand our own thoughts and then how we accept those thoughts as they are only thoughts. It's not actually happening to me right now often. It's something that I'm anticipating might happen, something that I'm preparing for. There's a lot of things that go on with anxious thoughts, and I would say predominantly it's things that haven't even happened yet, and we're trying to anticipate that. And that's never ever going to be the best way to think about things. Another question that I get asked a lot, particularly by parents, but some athletes will ask me about how many hours of sleep you should have a night. And the answer is varied depending on your age. And it's very interesting to hear that the recommended sleep for our youth is 9 to 10 hours a night. And if you add that up, it means that if they're getting up at 6 o'clock, they're not supposed to be going to bed at 11. So you need to do the math. So I always talk to my athletes about, what time do you need to get up? That's my first question. And if they say, oh, well, I wake up at 6 o'clock and then I snooze and then I snooze and then I probably don't get up till 7 o'clock. It's the wake up time that we need to be aware of. So if they have to wake up at 6 o'clock, they need to be going to bed at 9 o'clock if they're going to get 9 hours sleep. I don't know too many athletes that go to bed and go to sleep at 9 o'clock. So it's really about making sure that the routine works backwards and we maximize the amount of hours that we get to sleep. The other problem is that a lot of teenagers, particularly when they're growing and developing and their lives are very busy and they're going here, there and everywhere, is they then spend the weekends trying to catch up their sleep. So they'll go to bed at midnight, but they'll sleep till 10, 11 the next day. Whilst that's 10 or 11 hours of that day, it doesn't mean that they're catching up sleep, and that doesn't mean that they're storing sleep. Our body works on a cycle. So it's a 24-hour cycle, and we need that many hours in our day of sleep every day for our body to regenerate and recover and repair. It doesn't do a better job by sleeping more on the weekends. The other part of that is it's a very unhealthy routine to have less sleep during the week and then more sleep on the weekend, which then confuses your body's natural sleeping routine. So now we're in a situation where we're having some sleep some days, lots of sleep the other days, and our body works best on routine in every way. The more we do things in a routine way, the more our body physiologically adapts to that. Our hormone levels, our sugar levels, our blood pressure, our heart rate. The more routine, the better we function. And that's a really important thing to remember is we can't catch up sleep. We lose it, it's gone, it doesn't come back. And the impact of having these poor sleep routines is it also has a big impact on our mood and how we feel about just doing our day-to-day things. Our motivation is low. We make poor food choices because we're too tired or we can't be bothered. If we are having low mood and low energy, our body is screaming for us to have high energy foods. It's telling us we need sugar in our brain and sugar in our body to give us energy. What happens though is that's short term. So we have a sugar fix or a caffeine fix or whatever it might be, and then we have this big influx of energy, which is great, but then we fall back down into that low energy, low mood. That stimulus to our brain needs to be a lot better. So it needs to be foods that release sugar into our bloodstream on a more consistent level. So our blood sugar levels remain at a really good level and are not going up and down all the time. When we're making these choices about what we eat during these days where we feel a little bit low and our energy is a bit low, we need to make a much more deliberate decision about what we're going to eat so that whatever we're eating is releasing the sugar into our bloodstream at a consistent level so that our energy levels are the same, our mood levels are the same, and we're not going up and down with our energy and our mood. And if we're doing that over a day where we're trying to give ourselves that quick fix all the time, imagine what happens when we go to sleep. We're trying to then at the end of that day where we're really tired, our brain is fried, our energy's down, and we've spent the whole day going up and down and up and down and up and down with our blood sugar levels, and now we're trying to sleep because we're exhausted. We need to be really conscious of our nutrition and our hydration when we're not feeling 100% like that. But anyway, was there? Just need to chop it. Another question that I get often is what happens when we're traveling? Often you're sleeping in a different bed, in a different place. You might be traveling internationally, so you have to get on a plane. So how do we make sure that if we are going away for a tournament and it's a really important one, or we're traveling to compete, getting a good sleep at this stage is really important. And this can be varied. It might be that you're sleeping on a blow-up mattress on a floor, unfortunately, at times. So getting optimal sleep can sometimes be difficult. So dealing with that and controlling some of the other things that you may be able to control because your bed might not be what it is. You might not get the opportunity to go to sleep at the right time. If you look at the Australian Open, for an example, some of the players are having to play until midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. Their body clocks are going to be way out because in a normal routine, they might be going to bed at 10, but now they've actually had to compete and take themselves to the top of their performance until early hours of the morning. For them to then recover from that, they need to then focus on all the other things that help them recover, making sure they do all of their recovery in terms of eating, hydrating, their recovery strategies, getting treatment, cooling down. All of those things are vital things that they can do to help because sleep is the optimal recovery strategy, but they don't get that opportunity necessarily to sleep really well after being up so late. They need to optimize that performance by focusing on all the other things that come with recovery. When we're talking about sleep, it is the number one thing that you should focus on for recovery. All the other things come as a secondary to that, and we get asked a lot of questions about recovery, and we will be doing a podcast on recovery in the future. But for now, if you just focus on sleep, hydration and nutrition, you are well on the way to being able to recover well and continue to sleep well. So I guess if we're wrapping this up, when I'm talking to athletes about their sleep, they're often a bit blasé about the importance of it and understanding it because all of the kids around them are having the same sleep habits. They're up late on their phones, you're constantly scrolling or messaging or whatever it might be on their devices, and everyone's doing it. And it's a really hard sell to sit an athlete down and explain the importance of, 1, the devices need to go. 2, they need to have a routine. 3, they need to have a lot more hours sleep than they are. 9 hours should be their goal, And that is to ensure that as they're growing and developing, they're giving their body the opportunity to repair and regenerate overnight. It is a hard sell. And unfortunately, it comes down to parents to make the hard decisions around devices and routine and bedtime and all of those things. And it's never an easy job, and I understand that. But developing these routines as a young person is absolutely vital. It will have a big impact on your general health in the future and reducing their risk factors as well. So focusing on it is really important, and identifying the areas that you can work on and the things that are best for your athlete is really important. If we have athletes that are travelling internationally, one of the big things is the flight over and dealing with the sleep that does or doesn't happen on this flight. So preparing yourself for international travel is really important. So for the weeks leading up to it, you can start to change the hours at which you start to sleep, when you go to sleep, when you wake up, to start to match a little bit more closely to where you're going. That obviously depends on what's happening here as opposed to what's going to happen over there, but it's really important to get that happening. One of the things you can do on the flight too is think about what time it's going to be morning where you're going, and try and delay your sleep on your flight or change your sleep pattern on the flight, so that when you arrive at your destination, your body is in a situation where it is almost on time with regard to your sleep. So that's another thing that you can do. Making sure that you hydrate really well, that you don't drink alcohol on the plane. So that's obviously for adults, but drinking a lot of alcohol on a plane does not help with your sleep patterns. And here's the heads up. Alcohol does not help us sleep. It makes you feel like it helps you sleep because you fall asleep, but it doesn't help sleep at all. So the takeaway message that I'd like to get across today is having a sleep routine, waking up at the same time, going to sleep at the same time, eating well, putting your devices away, not eating late at night so that it keeps you awake, not drinking high caffeine drinks at the end of the day, not doing things that will wake you up towards the end of the night. Having a routine where you are winding down is really important. And then the last thing we're going to talk about today is maybe using your devices to reduce your distractions at night. So what are your thoughts, Elkie?
I will put this up on our Instagram page of how to set up a sleep routine on your phone. Phones are now helping us sleep, which is contrary to this whole podcast. But I've recently found sleep routines on my phone. I think it's on iPhones, Androids now. And you can basically set up a routine where you can restrict apps at a certain time. So they basically go grey on your phone, which I'll show on an Instagram reel later. And you can't click on them before you go to sleep. So for example, I have my phone set up that my restricted apps start at 8:30, and I still have certain contacts that can contact me. So my family, if emergencies happen, they can ring through, they can text through, just to make sure everyone's safe and nothing bad happens in the night, because things do happen. But apps like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, they are all inaccessible to me at that time. Unfortunately, with this, you can turn it off in your settings, but I am way too lazy to see my grey apps, try and click it, and then it says, you have to turn this off. I won't go and turn it off personally, but I do understand that athletes might. So enforcing that will be difficult, but it's awesome for adults and athletes.
A lot of the sleep routine or developing that sleep routine is all about discipline, and talking to athletes about that is sometimes difficult. And again, it might be something that takes 12 months to change. It's about making those changes gently over time so that they start to improve. If you try and change everything at once, and this is life in general, if you're trying to change the way you eat, the way you sleep, the way you exercise, the way that you interact, it's too much information. So starting with the simple things like shutting down a device may make all the difference in your sleep routine. And that might be the only thing you have to change. I'm not saying everyone has to have a routine, but making sure that you reduce the things that are impacting your sleep. And over time, if you get to a point where you've reduced it enough and you are getting good sleep and regular sleep, then you don't need to go any further. Some people need to have a really strict sleep routine. Unfortunately, I'm one of those people and I hate it and it frustrates me. It frustrates me when people say, oh, well, I don't know why you can't sleep. Well, that's because they've never had this problem before. And it's really frustrating when people can't get sleep. And that means that sometimes they're waking up frustrated. And that's not a great way to start your day. Being tired when you wake up can also lead to frustration and a lack of motivation. Prioritizing your sleep, and I'm probably talking to parents as well, prioritizing sleep is something that we absolutely need to do. It has such an impact on every part of our life, and we don't give it enough thought, and we don't put in place enough healthy sleep habits to help ourselves improve our day-to-day feeling. If we're feeling energized, if we're feeling like our body's working properly and we've had enough rest, that's a really great way to start your day. When we're waking up and we're tired and it's just another day rolling into another day because I've only got 4 hours sleep or 5 hours sleep, it's not a nice feeling. So take-home message is, have a think about your sleep. How many hours are our adults getting? You need to be getting 7 to 8 hours, most people. So are you getting that many hours of sleep? Are you preventing yourself going to sleep by having devices on, by having unhealthy sleep habits? That's something that we all need to have a look at and address. If you're one of those lucky people that goes to bed, puts their head on the pillow, falls asleep, wakes up at the right time to the alarm, well, that's fantastic. I'm really happy for you because you are in a minority and you probably don't have a lot of understanding or sympathy for those that don't necessarily have that luxury. I just want to let people know that this podcast is based on a lot of experience in the industry and some of the conversations and questions that I've had throughout that career, and by no means is it specific advice, and you can take what you need from the information, and we hope that it starts to allow people to ask more questions or consider certain situations in a different way.